Welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod. I am your acting captain, and it is Stardate 100075.35. And with me is,
Is that my cue?
yep,
Suzanne, hi. Sorry. I thought y'all were going to go first. Great start to this.
Oh, Elizabeth.
Phil.
so excited. We are here. We're going to get a chance to talk about an incredible episode 8, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the Elysian Kingdom. But first, as we introduce ourselves, Suzanne, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your Trek background? Tell us more about kind of what you've thought so far about Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, so I started out with TNG when I was a little baby. My parents put me in front of TNG when I was probably the minute I got home from the hospital, frankly. And I've loved it ever since. And huge Voyager fan. Voyager's always going to be my favorite. But Strange New Worlds is really, really amazing. I really, really like it so far. There aren't very many things. There are very many negative things I have to say about it, really. I really, really love it so far. And this episode particularly is a favorite of mine. So.
Great. Well, I'm excited that we could talk about one of your favorite episodes. Look, if you are seeing some names and wondering who they are, we've got a couple of our very own Patreon, our patrons with us live on the pod this week, filling in as Mariah is on an away mission. Phil is here. If you're not watching us live, Phil is wearing a red shirt. We hope that he'll make it to the end. No guarantees. But I just want to say, if you are wondering how you can interact with us, if you are watching us live on whatever streaming platform you are, by all means, type capital P, capital O, capital D in the chat, and we will take a look at your comment. And when we get to that special place, we will ask you to type capital H, capital F for your you know what. And since we are talking about you know what, why don't we go ahead and get into that special time?
Hot freaks! Hot freaks!
All right, so our hot freaks. So instead of your hot takes, we'd love your hot freaks. So why don't we jump in? Who wants to go first? Give us your hot freak on this episode.
All right, I'll do it. So I said this when we were doing our Patreon watch along tonight. I was like, this episode is so Star Trek that it hurts so good because it was just campy. It hit some great emotional notes. It referenced a whole lot of different Star Trek tropes in its like overall concept, and I just loved it. So that's my hot freak.
Great, Phil. Elizabeth, what about you?
Oh, and I thought it was great too. I thought it was a really nice departure from the stoic kind of like disaster episodes. It was really fun to see them have you could tell the actors had a great time. The sets were beautiful. I thought that it was just really like a whole lot of fun. It was exactly the type of sci-fi that I adore. I loved it.
Great. Suzanne, what did you love about this episode?
Yeah, no, I actually want to comment a little bit about the set dressing was just so beautiful and so like just so perfect. And I'm a huge like costumes nerd and everything, but I think that the set dressing definitely needs a lot of love. It was absolutely gorgeous to look at and to watch them go through all these different, how they changed all the bays into whatever they should be for the story. And I also I really love Pike's middle part. Like, this is such a random thing to mention, but I just love that they gave him like this little like curled fringe of like the like, oh, please don't hurt me, like I'll betray you if you don't hurt me type of villain. And I love him. I absolutely love middle part Pike.
Oh, I thought this was a great episode. I think my first thought was, oh wow, we're getting a holodeck episode without a holodeck, kind of early in their tenure, and so I thought it was I thought it was really well done though for that. And I think anytime you can dress the ship, and we've seen this in very various sci-fi series, but to dress the ship as something else, particularly this kind of,
Ren Fair vibe.
yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Ren Fair.
Star Trek Ren Fair episode. Perfect.
That's exactly
That's
it.
it.
Yes. So they're taking this set that we know and love, right? That we've already grown kind of used to and accustomed to, and they just transformed it with greenery and tapestry. Like, I thought it was amazing. So the set was incredible. The costuming was absolutely just phenomenal. And I, for one, love the idea of an Mbanga and Himmer kind of team up. Like, sign me up. I thought that's a buddy cop show that I'm absolutely down to watch.
Totally.
So yeah, so I thought it was really good. And just fun. Not to mention, I think we've all been looking to see, are we going to get to know more about what happens with his daughter? Are we going to get some conclusion there, particularly before the episode goes? And we got that, and I thought it was done really well. Like, I thought this episode was really kind of fun and a little campy and kind of tongue in cheek, and everybody's playing different personas. And it's silly at times, and then the end kind of takes you to a place that really touched you in a very tender spot. So I thought this was a great episode. But let's talk about some things. What are some things that stood out to you guys, right, that you just really loved? Or, Phil, things that may not have made sense. Whatever. Jump in there, Suzanne.
I just wanted to mention, kind of along the lines of what you said about how it was such a silly kind of episode at parts, and then at the end it manages to make it a Star Trek story. It makes it emotional. It has this choice between this or this, and like needs of the many type thing. And I think it says a lot that Strange New Worlds was able to do in one episode, sort of a campy, fun storyline, and at the same time stick to the sort of not necessarily moral of the story, but it still was serious, and it still made me cry at points. And I don't cry at television. I don't, but it made me a little teary-eyed. It was really, really well done. And I think that it says a lot for sure about the show that they're able to do that. And it was really, really, really well done.
Yeah, I think that in like 90s Trek, they would have done this episode and it would have been wholly self-contained. And that bit about his daughter would have been like introduced in the beginning of the episode and then closed off at the end. But here what they've done is they've been pulling at that thread for a while. But at the same time, you don't necessarily have to have watched all of that to still get the payoff. And I think that was really well executed. It kind of reminded me of the way some of like the character arcs in like DS9 and even a little bit in Voyager, where they were constantly pulling at a little thread here and there, but you still managed to have a relatively well self-contained story that still packed a punch.
Mm-hmm. And this is the second episode we've had now where we have a father having to make the ultimate sacrifice, which is also interesting. But it was the way they concluded it was really nice. And I, because usually in Trek, the whole non-corporeal alien thing never pans out well, especially when dealing with children. So it's actually nice to see a positive resolution for that. This was cool.
Yeah, and I like that. What they could have easily gone in the direction of, he says goodbye and then, oh, we'll see each other again, or I'll come back and see you, and we never see her again. But they kind of gave us a little bit of a fast forward where she's like, it's only been a couple seconds for you, but it's been a lifetime for me. And I feel like we really got closure to that story. I got to bring up a comment. James says his hot freak is, I think this falls into Clyde's unofficial category of, if they had 26 episodes a season, sure. Look, James, you're not wrong. In fact, I was watching this and talking to a friend, and I said literally those same words. Like, if there were and I think I said, if there were even 18 episodes, this is perfect. So part of me was kind of thinking like, I got 3 more episodes of this, and you did not move the story one iota. However, this is different. Like this falls in the slightly different category because what we're getting with Strange New World is something that's much more akin to TOS, to TNG, and it's purely episodic. There's not some big bad that we're fighting along all season. There's not this overarching arc that we have to get to completion. These episodes are largely, for the most part, self-contained. And each one will do a little bit of character development. This was a interesting way to develop Mbenga. It's a buddy of mine said, the first time we get a doctor specific kind of episode and it's storybook time. Interesting choice, but I enjoyed it, right? And so I think I'm kind of loosening up a little bit, but yeah, I did kind of think, man, this is what we're getting.
Isn't it a unspoken Trek rule that if they have a doctor-specific story, it has to end with them curing whatever it is by venting it through the environmental system? I think that's.
I mean, just about.
Pretty much.
I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I, did at any point did you have a slight hesitation of, I only get 10 episodes? How did you feel about this being one of them?
I kind of had the reverse feeling. I feel like I got done with it and I just had my first watch this evening. And I had this moment where I said, we're like 7-8 episodes in at this point, and we just did an entire episode where everyone was out of character. And I feel like in older Trek, if we had not developed those characters well enough, we would not have earned this. And for a lot of these folks to see them in such radically different roles and knowing what their other character is like and feeling like we have that, because I feel like Strange New Worlds has done a good job of that in the little bit of time that it has, that this actually resonated pretty well. And we were able to kind of pull that off. And the characters which we didn't have as much development, Hemmer, were themselves, right? So it was really interesting to kind of watch that and think about, I don't think that there's no way that Disco would have been able to pull this off on episode 7, because the only character that they would have been able to reverse would have been Michael, but that's just the way that they run that show. This one, they've put a lot of effort into developing those characters so that they can flip them and have a payoff here.
Yeah, I think that's a strength of Strange New World specifically because, they have made this episodic show. They can they have a lot more leeway, I think, in that way than Discovery would or that Picard would. I think that they have a lot more leeway in that sense of like each episode is self-contained and they can make pretty much whatever they want. It worked really, really well, I think, here. And I don't have a lot of gripes about it. And I'm also an absolute sucker for good costumes, fairy tale, role play stuff. I love that. I absolutely love that. I also think it's interesting, and someone tweeted this and I cannot remember who it is, and if they watch this and get mad at me, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but someone mentioned that the reason that Hemmer was able to block out the whole entity was that he had telepathic abilities, which Spock also does. And so Spock probably felt it and said, that's all right, wizard time. And I love that idea. I love that. I know it's not true, but I just think it's really funny that Spock was somehow susceptible and Hemmer wasn't. I just think it's really funny.
As the patrons will know, I like to say because reasons.
Exactly. It's Star Trek. Who cares? But I love the idea that Spock was like, screw it. Let's go. Wizard time.
Phil, I love what you said. Yeah. Phil, I love what you said a minute ago, though, about the two characters who we got their true characters were Mbenga and Hemmer, the two characters that we probably know the least about, that we've been looking to know more about. I thought that was a really smart choice to give us, we didn't quite get a Hemmer centric episode, but we got more about him and seeing he's actually funny. What he did when he brought out, his device. I thought that was amazing. He's a funny guy. He's not always serious. And typically I think a lot of times when we think about your engineers, right? The engineer of the ship, they tend to be very, very serious, right? We get a little bit different with Jet Reno, who is still very serious. She's just funny because she's usually making fun of someone else, and that's funny. Himmer was just kind of funny. Like I want to know more about him. So I thought that was a really good choice. Everyone else we've had episodes that focus on bits and pieces of them and their storyline.
And the ones that were as far away from their original characters as possible were the ones that we know very well, like Pike, like La'an. I mean, come on, La'an was hysterical. And who else? Like I felt like Una was good, but that character wasn't all that different from Una. It was just a fun spin on her. But the others were sort of a total opposite from who they are.
I could have done with more Una, right? Like the Huntress showed up and then went away, and I thought the Huntress was going to stick around a little bit more.
Totally want to cosplay Una cosplaying the Huntress. It was like,
Now that is an idea.
Oh yeah.
I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see it quite a bit.
Oh yeah. I'm excited to see the cosplay that comes out of this. Like, am I the only one that saw that and said, someone will make that? Someone will slay. I'm excited to see it. Oh, I love it. I love it.
I didn't think about it, but now that you say it, I can see it.
Especially Uhura. Just saying.
So what did you guys think of Uhura? So again, completely different character. But what did you think of her portrayal as the evil queen?
That was a great choice because she's so meek and like not quiet, but she's very, it was a total antithesis of her, like who she really is. So I thought it was a really great choice to make her the evil queen.
Really cool. I thought it was really, really cool. I know it looked like she was having fun, and I think that's the best part of it for me, is that you can tell that she's having fun doing that. And I think that like they have so many strengths as an actor, but like that was awesome. I loved getting to see like this theatrical version of Uhura, and just like, it very much looked to me like everybody, not just her, like everybody was having fun. Everybody just loved it. And it's really, really cool. It was a really, really cool. I think it was a really good choice to make her the evil queen as well. Yeah. Because it is such an opposite to who she is.
Well, and she really did have some epic fingernails.
That too.
No, if you have a chance to check out the Ready Room with Will Wheaton, he goes nuts and loves this episode. And Will likes to bring things back to his experiences on TNG, and this is very reminiscent of kind of a Sherwood Forest holodeck episode. But as we get to see some of the characters, Suzanne, you're spot on. They had a blast doing this. Like the fun that they had on set was just contagious. And when you think about Uhura in particular, like this was a lot of fun. Like she got to, I think they said her dress was like 6 feet or something like that wide. Like they had a great time kind of dressing up and kind of twirling around. She was like, it's almost like prom. Like it was, she had a great time. So I think that comes across really well, kind of on film, like on camera. Like you're seeing that, anytime the crew likes being around each other and having a good time, you're seeing that. And so I think that was evident.
Yeah. It also like sort of felt like a love letter to nerds. Like this whole episode just felt like paradise for geeks, because like we've got like the people who are into Star Trek that might also LARP or like go to Ren fairs or whatever, and we have all of this right in front. It's absolutely no wonder Will Wheaton was like geeking out about it, because it's totally just like it's absolutely made for nerds, and it's awesome. Such a good episode.
Yes. Kang's hot fracas who doesn't love Star Trek meets Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's the only thing you were really missing was a dragon. Like that would have worked right in there in terms of having, and if this was TNG, there would have definitely been some type of dragon roaming the halls or something. But no, this was a lot of fun. This was a love letter to geeks. It was, I think also it was incredibly accessible, right? For people who are new to Trek. It wasn't that hard to figure out. It wasn't some story that has secretly being told over and over. Like we've heard a little bits and pieces of him reading this story to his daughter. And I think for us, it was kind of cool to see this story that he's been reading come to life. And so I thought, like that was a lot of fun, no? Were you guys curious about the story that he's been reading to his daughter?
Yeah, and it really shows, while they're going for an episodic approach here, they've been planting that seed. He wasn't just reading some generic story and then they decided what it was going to be about. Like those were names that were brought up. And I know that that's how TV now is written, but if you were to compare that to like Trek before, they may have had to retcon that, or they wouldn't have addressed it at all. I'm like, oh yeah, he's been reading this story for 3 years. We've just never shown it on screen before. So it's just a different approach. And I like that they, wrap that all up.
Could have used a little more Nurse Chapel though. I think.
Yeah, we absolutely could have. Like, it's one of those things where there's always a character that we're like, okay, I guess they were. This is the week that they're not there for whatever reason.
She was there more than La'an was.
But La'an was so big, like her presence was so enormous, even in her small role.
That's very true.
Every character had their moment where like they were definitely there for us to like marvel and laugh at what they were. And then some of them obviously had longer implications in the story and others did not. I laughed the entire time La'an was on. And when Chapel was like doing her like aura sensing thing that she was doing, I about lost it. Is that a healing stone? Like
it's so funny.
That was hilarious. Well, and I think one thing that's incredibly memorable about La'an, not to mention her dress as well, but it was the dog. What did you guys think of the dog?
I want her dog,
little baby.
So
just
awesome.
It added to the level that just how different that was than La'an.
The singing was like that was the cherry on top.
God, it's
that
so
horrible
it's
singing.
So good.
What's fascinating to me, so again, if you kind of watch the Ready Room, Christine Chong talks about the fact that that's actually her dog. And so this was kind of a plot from early on. There was this idea of she was trying to figure out if she could get her dog into an episode of Star Trek. Like someone was like, oh, you should see. And so she's kind of asking around. And then they go, well, she asked the director and said, well, maybe we can get your dog into the storybook episode. Like that's, the fantasy one. And she never thought it was going to happen. And yet they look and say, yep, we're going to do it. And they thought it added a great little piece. It was the first time that the costume designer had designed a costume for a dog. They literally had a great time doing it. And there's a moment where Christine talks about she was a little worried. The director comes over to her and she thinks that she's going to talk about her performance. And she's just like, I just want you to tell you that your dog did an amazing job. And she was just kind of like, okay.
I love that.
So it really became like we said, this is a group that enjoys being around each other. And they took an episode that was a bit different than anything that we've seen. And they had a really good time doing it. Okay. We've started to have a bit of a love fest with this episode. Are there really no nits we could pick? There's nothing?
I just feel like we could have had, like, we kind of touched on this before. I think that each of the characters had their 5 minutes, but it would have been great if they wove them all in a little bit better and more throughout the episode. But I'm getting like super nitpicky with that.
What about speaking of kind of those characters with their 5 minutes, how did you feel about seeing Pike in this very different non-captain, goofy, inept kind of character, especially for those of you who love you some handsome Mount, right? Because he's so dreamy. This was different. Did it work for you? Did it talk to me a little bit? Phil, I'm talking to you when I say, he's dreamy.
I liked it a lot too. I think that the fun part about that was just was how different he was. I don't. This is a very obscure reference, and I don't know if anybody's going to understand what I'm talking about. But he reminds me of Carrie Elwes' character in Ella Enchanted, I think it is, the like creepy uncle that's trying to take the kingdom or whatever. And he's not quite that smart, but it's just this sort of very not camp, but like sort of over exaggerated, like kind of like villain that I just love. Just not even a villain, just sort of very opportunist and like, I don't want to get wet. I'm gonna go over here where it's not raining. And then like I loved it. I loved seeing that sort of different conniving sort of snivelly little.
I got Prince Humperdinck vibes, like
yes, exactly. That's definitely better.
Nothing like a Princess Bride reference on a Star Trek podcast.
That was total Princess Bride.
His little prancy run when he was running.
Yes.
I think my favorite part was when they were in the ready room of sorts, and he was talking about, it's like, maybe I would be a better assistant in the castle, and he just calls him and goes, okay. I loved that. It was so well done, and I feel like you can also tell again that like Anson's having a really fun time being not serious and perfect all the time, and it's awesome. It's really, really fun, especially when they interact. And I think I agree with Phil there that like weaving them into the story a little bit differently might have been more successful or as successful and just slightly different. But yeah, it was great. I loved it.
There's some comments in the chat that I want us to tackle for a second. So there seems to be some questions about whether or not what Pike was doing was we were seeing a straight actor who was kind of doing gay affectations. Is that what you guys got, or were you thinking that he was kind of playing a character that was portraying gay mannerisms? Is that what you think we were saying?
I
didn't get that vibe.
I didn't get it. I didn't get that vibe as a lesbian. But no, I didn't. It wasn't offensive to me at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is a trope sort of the effeminate gay, like not villain, but sort of opportunist, if that makes sense. Just the very kind of snivelly, sleazy kind of person. I love it. I love that trope. I don't know why, but I do. But I didn't get that he was doing it on purpose or doing it specifically to be necessarily to make it gay coded, but I think that it's there, and I don't think it's something to ignore. I would like to hear other people's opinions on it, because I just watched it, I need to rewatch it and kind of go over it again. But I didn't get that it was on purpose or that it was like a joke, if that makes sense, because I feel like sometimes it can go too far. But I liked it. I thought it was really well done, and I didn't think it was like over the top at all.
I'll have to say that wasn't something that I thought about at all. My read on it was that his character was weak and cowardly, and that's how he interacts with the world in terms of kind of backstabbing and looking out for him, avoiding the hard choices. Like it was more of a, a little bit more like Humperdinck than something that I really read as offensive. I want to be open to the fact that there are people who could have read that as offensive, but that wasn't what I picked up on. So I think that's an interesting read that I want to be kind of open to, and that's why I thought I'd bring it up to you guys.
I didn't catch it on my first watch. I'll have to be a little bit more, pay attention a little bit closer to some of his mannerisms directly. I think one of the challenges with this episode, when you're looking at something that normally would go over your head like that, as it does for me, is everyone was out of character. So anytime anyone was on screen, you're paying attention to how different everybody is. And for me, I think I was just looking at all of it all at once and didn't catch that.
Yeah, I thought there was an interesting subtext between Una and Ortegas. Suzanne, were you excited about that?
I loved it personally. What I loved about it was that it wasn't weird.
No.
Like it didn't become this whole thing. It didn't make it, it just was like it just happened. It's there, and I liked it. I'm not saying that I ship it because not really, but also I liked that. I liked that it was there, and I liked that it was just like, oh no, Rukia totally wanted them to end up together, and then we know each other very well. Like that was just spot on. Loved that. And I will say that partially it's because like they are the opposites of their like who they would be, because I feel like of the two people that would be a couple, like nope. But in the story it makes sense. I did want to touch again on the whole like gay mannerisms villain trope, because that is a trope that's it's everywhere. And I don't think it's necessarily like on purpose when actors do that. I think that it's more of like it's just been a thing that a lot of times villains like that, there's like conniving and kind of snivelly and are typically presented as effeminate, which is like the sort of the bad thing of like, oh, well, they don't want to get messy. They don't want to get hurt. They like cower in fear, but it's not necessarily a feminine thing, or it's not necessarily a gay thing. And so I think that the thing to combat there would just be the trope itself, rather than, I don't think that it was ever like purposefully, intentionally like offensive or like done on purpose. I guess it's a very complex issue for me, and one that honestly I don't feel like I have the knowledge of the television world to like speak on super well. But I didn't see it as something, as a gay person, I wasn't offended by it, but I can see why other people would say, hey, maybe this is a trope we shouldn't do anymore. It makes sense, but honestly I thought it was done really well, and it wasn't overdone. And I think that that's the thing that can get a lot of people in trouble. So I liked it. I thought it was very well done. And I also really loved the Una and Ortega's bit. I thought that was really funny.
I loved Ortega's bloodlust. She just wanted to kill something.
What did she
She
say?
just wants to cut things in half.
What's her sword?
I
Her
respect
sword
it.
had an awesome name, and I can't remember.
It was Star something.
Yeah. It was awesome.
It's like
I can't remember
Starblade
either.
or
It's
something like that.
Thirsty. It's like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Girl, what?
Well, now you've got me making all kind of Princess Bride reference to this, but I love
Inigo
Ortega's.
Montoya.
You killed
Yes,
my
I mean-
favorite today.
I totally got
Absolutely.
that vibe too.
Yeah,
You
but
killed my
I
king.
loved Ortegas in this. Like, she was probably one of my favorite characters in this, right? Fiercely loyal, incredibly competent, ready to, and in most of the scenes. Now, do I count this as an Ortegas centric episode, or I'm getting enough about Ortegas? Absolutely not. So I still want that. Like, give me more. But definitely one of my favorite characters. Between the trio really of Ortegas, Himmer, and Mbega, I thought this was, I love their dynamic, right? Kind of the idea, the image of them walking through the halls together, searching. I thought it was really cool. Like I'm ready to see that now. I'm going, want to see them on the away team together, right? Let's get that. Let's make that happen, right? You got an engineer, a doctor, and a pilot. Let's do it.
An engineer,
like,
a doctor, and a pilot go
science-
on an away mission.
Science vibe.
With
Walk into a bar.
Phil, the red shirt, it's one of them's not coming back.
He's crewman number 6.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Although in Modern Trek, what they would do is they'd give me like 5 minutes of exposition in the beginning of the episode versus just having me be a total rando.
Yes, we've graduated now, right? Like it's like, that person that we've never seen before is talking. They suddenly have a lot of lines.
Yeah.
Oh, and they're on transporter pad. Yep, not seeing them again.
Why did we get a whole 5 minutes about Arium that felt oddly placed? Oh shit! Like,
Exactly. It.
Oh my god.
No. So yeah. So what? Anything else stood out to you? We could talk a little bit about the contrast between, the brothers, the telepathic wizard brothers and Spock and Himmer. What did you guys think about that? Did you expect the Spock betrayal?
Yeah, he had that greasy kind of like Game of Thrones backstabbing look to him, which was
Little
awesome.
finger vibes, if you will.
Yeah.
When he
The
said we
little
have to go,
twirly
we have
mustache. He just needed the little.
He needs like a bird, like villain with his bird,
Yeah.
waiting to conquer the world.
when he said we have to go a dark way around, I was like, Jeffrey's tube. They're taking the Jeffrey's tube.
That was so good.
I mean,
That was really cool to see the Jeffries tube finally.
was amazing. And I mean, could you have had this episodes without the Jeffrey tubes? I mean, that wouldn't have been any fun at all.
Mm-mm.
Exactly. Dark passageway, Jeffrey's tips. And yeah, it makes so much sense. And it's also just like quintessential Trek. I loved it. I love that.
It is. You got if you're gonna do Trek, right? Then you have to almost find reasons to send someone through a Jeffrey's tubes in almost every episode. Like that's just part of it, right? Like what is an episode of Trek without someone randomly climbing through a Jeffrey's tube for something? Could be a diagnostic, could be because the turbo lift is out, could be because some villain is taking over the ship. Doesn't matter, storybook. That's the way you get through the swamp. I just give me any old reason, and I'm for it.
Especially if they're rerouting power from the tertiary manifolds, right?
Yep, absolutely. Oh, awesome. It was so cool. I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about specifically just because, like, I don't know. I think that it was really well done, just like the whole storybook vibe. But like the Jeffrey's tubes again was just like, that was so perfect. That was like, all right, this is going to be a good episode. Awesome. It was fantastic. I'm so glad we're here. I also really loved Wizard Spock. I loved him. I thought he was neat, frankly. It was kind of silly, I guess, to see, but we kind of got like the long hair, like depressed Spock back from like the Discovery, with the beard and everything. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so silly and so perfect. And I also really liked the moments, I guess, between Mbenga and Una as well. I really loved that. I thought it was really sweet. And like they genuinely seem like friends. I mean, she's, she had a secret, he had a secret. They've kind of helped each other out with both of those things. And it seems like they're getting closer as characters, which I really, really, really love. I really liked those scenes. I thought they were really well done.
Yeah, it's one thing that about number one, Una in particular, that I think we get is this genuine caringness that she has, right? And that's an interesting place for your XO to be, because what we know is that Mbenga he kept a secret. He had his daughter kind of in this transporter, this private transporter. It created issues on the ship. And what Una did was she stepped up to say, hey, we're going to reroute power so that this doesn't happen again. And so that you don't have to worry about this. And they could have left it right there. But what we get with Una is someone who genuinely cares about her people, whether it's Leon or now Benga. But for her to show up and ask, how's it going? Right? And then for her to come back and really engage him in a way to check on him. I don't want to say it's unique, but I think what I'm seeing is a genuineness that she cares about him as a person. I'm going to say this, and there may be some strong reactions. Have we ever seen an XO, a number one, that has been as genuine and their caringness about the person over the officer? Right? I mean, you've got Chakotay, and you've got Riker and Spock, and I mean, just kind of thinking about it for a little bit, right?
That's definitely unique. Yeah,
I think Una is definitely unique, but I think Chakotay would be a close second to her.
Okay.
Because of the situation that ship was in, far-flung, crew smashed together, they really only had each other. And he definitely looked out both sides, one after Janeway and two after all the people that she was over as well. I definitely caught that vibe from him in some ways, but this definitely felt a little different. Like Una walked in there and she started out like, hey, you haven't done your job, but I'm guessing there's probably a really good reason for that. So let's talk about that, right?
Yeah, that balance, right? The thing about Chakotay that's always been interesting to me is he came in with a very close relationship with the Maquis, right? And so part of his, kind of what was going on for him was he wanted to make sure that his people were okay in this new world, right? And he ultimately cared for everybody, and he was, kind of a very caring person. But this feels different. Like there, that balance of, look, I need you to take care of your business, but I'm concerned about you as a person. That felt new for me.
Yeah, she's demonstrated that with La'an too, right?
Mhm.
With La'an, she's definitely like a big sister. Like it really is resonating as like she's very different. She's very
I even think we see a little bit of it with how she interacts with Pike, right? Like
Oh yeah.
there's a lot to this character that I'm fascinated by, right? And I'm wondering how much we're gonna get.
She's very much sort of the ship mom, but she's not the captain, so she doesn't have to maintain the same level of distance that I think some captains have felt that they have to have. And Pike is still different in that way, and Una may be very well a product of the environment that Pike has created as well. I mean, the two seem to have similar methodologies there in how they talk to the crew. I mean, I noticed in this episode, Pike continued his thing of referring to his crew by first name, not by rank. So and I think that sets a tone as well, and she's probably stepping right into that.
Yeah, as you mentioned that, Phil, I think one of the things that I pick up on is usually when I think about first officers, what the writers, the directors, what the Star Trek universe gives us is this is a person who's so supremely qualified they could be captain, right? Whether it's Spock, Chakotay was he was a captain. You think about Riker, like we get this whole like, Riker, when are you gonna stop? When are you gonna get out of Picard's shadow? Like there's this idea that you're number one, you've got a great number one, but you're just you're just holding on to them for a second before they move on to the next ship. I think in the pilot we saw a little about that with Una, but since then I don't get this like I'm ready to take over, and we don't really see her sitting in the big chair, right? We don't see a lot of her going, all right, I'm ready. It's like she's found a very comfortable place in being this exo who's also a bit of a counselor, is the way I put it. I don't know necessarily a mom vibe, but it's definitely a Deanna Troy vibe to me, right? Like I genuinely care about you.
Yeah, I get that. I for sure get that.
Yeah. Ooh, so the chat is saying they're looking at it as, what about Rafi? Right? Is that a
That's
good
true.
comparison? And speaking of which, because this is the tough one for me, because when we think about Picard, there's a question because their hierarchy is all over the place. They're really like a band of pirates. Who's captain and who's first officer in that dynamic?
So the thing about Rafi, because Kern mentioned this in the chat, if you go to the Picard books, she was Picard's exo during the evacuation of Romulus. And I think that's how she came up in this conversation here. What I can't remember from the story is what she was like in that way. But with the character she is now, I could definitely see that back then as well.
So maybe there is a little
I'd say so.
precedent for this. Yeah.
But
Okay.
still, I mean, not on
That's
screen, not with what we're seeing with Una. Like, she's different.
Yeah, I think they've definitely kind of started that earlier, and if they've made it more a part of her character than they did with Rafi necessarily, at least on screen, like to us, what we've seen. I think that for Rafi, it could be almost a weakness, not necessarily, but I think that a lot of the time she lets her own emotions about other people or her, get to her, and we see that in the way that she responds to the to Romulus and to everything that happens. I think that a lot of times she feels things for other people in a way that might be not super healthy. And I think that, not to say that it's like a bad thing or that it's necessarily a flaw, but like I see less of like her reaching out and more of her just feeling things really, really deeply.
Right.
Whereas with Una in the position that she's in, having this responsibility as first officer, but also having responsibility to the people that she cares about and to her crew, not only as officers but as people. I think that's definitely new. I think that's new. I think we haven't seen a ton of that. I do think that Rafi probably did have moments like that, though. It would shock me if like there was not a single time where she went to check up on a crew member that was hurt or otherwise, Anyway, I think that we don't see it as often with Rafi, but I think it's probably there, and I think it's different between the two of them. I think that their styles of interacting with people are very different. And so I don't know if it's fair to compare, but I also think it's important to talk about in that way, if that makes any sense. I'm rambling, but anyway.
Sorry. All right, I've got one more question, but before I get to that, anything else you guys want to talk about? Are there anything we haven't touched on?
I can be really quick, but I have one
Sure.
thing. I promise I'll
Go
be
ahead.
fast.
No, you're fine.
I think that the thing that I really loved was the resolution that we got with Rukia. I think that a lot of other episodes wouldn't have done that. I think that a lot of other Trek wouldn't have done that. I think it would have left it up in the air. I think it would have been like, maybe she's fine, maybe she's not. And I think it was really nice to have that closure and to see her grown and have that moment between her and her father. I really liked the way that was done. And I could see why people would complain about it, like leave it up to the imagination kind of thing. I could see why that could make some people upset, but I thought it was beautiful and I thought it was very well done.
Well, that's something that if they had 26 episodes, they would have gone back to check on her. See,
Yeah, exactly.
they would have made a whole secondary story about it. She would have sent a distress signal. It would have been a whole thing, right?
There would have been
Right.
a callback to it for sure. Like,
Oh, yeah.
why not? You got 26 episodes. You're trying to fill things in. You absolutely would have done that. But I agree with you, Suzanne. I was actually really happy. I was like, oh, okay, so this is going to be the thing that's open ended, and we're left to wonder what happens. But they gave us this flash forward, if you will. And I felt like it left him in a place where, you have this dad who gets to see that his daughter is happy and healthy, and he gets to he's wanted nothing more than to watch her grow up. And kind of in this moment when he decides to let her go, he basically says, I'm gonna forgo all that, right? This one thing that I've wanted is to see how she turns out and for her to be able to live. I'm not gonna be able to experience that. And then he gets this treat of being able to see, oh, look, she turns out great, and it's kind of this happily ever after. Like I look, I like the sappy stuff, right? I do. So I was here for it. I loved it. And I think someone else mentioned earlier, Elizabeth, you mentioned it, like this is our kind of second kind of dad episode. I like the way this one ended a lot better. And it almost not really makes up for that horrible feeling I had at the end of that other episode. It's kind of like, well, thank you. Little bit of redemption. But what, Phil, Elizabeth, what did you guys think about the kind of the resolution?
I think I really liked how it was interesting how they made it so that no one else remembered those 5 hours, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
Was it 5 hours? It was only Mbenga and Hammer. And I thought it was sweet how in the end Una, of course, with her, empathy and sympathy, she was I'm imagining that he's retelling the story in this epic way. This is how it went down, once upon a time, which is really cute. I thought that was a great ending. I'm imagining that he's filling her in, but maybe it's a little secret between the two of them, which would also be really nice. No one else really needs to know what went on. So I think that was a nice little resolution.
I was a little disappointed that Himmer didn't remember, because I thought that
That's right. He didn't remember.
he didn't remember. Yeah. So I kind of felt like if Himmer remembered, like now you've got Himmer and Mbenga who are going to be like these best friends who experience this thing together, and I was excited about it, and I'm like, like that was not even a nitpick. Just was like, I wish it had kind of been differently. But now you've got this thing that Mbenga has that is pretty much wholly his, and now he's choosing to share it with Una. I thought that was interesting. What about you, Phil? What do you think about the resolution?
So I'm going to go a different way. I liked it, but something we haven't talked about is the difference in how that girl lived. So when we first met her, she was living in the pattern buffer, and every time she was put away, she was frozen in time. And then as soon as she was released from that, from our perspective, she was accelerated, 10, 20 years? And so just the dichotomy there of watching her be frozen versus flourishing in an instant was a really, really powerful storytelling technique, I think. And then for her to come back and really give permission to her father to be okay with what he's done and to give him that closure was really powerful to watch as well.
I agree with that. I like that take, Phil. Yeah, that resolution, like, it really wraps up a bow on Mbenga and gives us a place for him to be able to exhale a little bit and feel like all that work and all that effort, which had to be hard, right? Like, to want to spend time with his daughter but can't, but you're trying to save her. What you're doing is a little weird and secretive, and now to be able to say, hey, no, it worked out. Like, that's amazing for him to be able to have that. And I feel like it's going to free him up to see some new things, and his character is going to develop in a new and exciting way.
Yeah. I was a little worried that they were going to use her as a tool to get him off the show, which would have been really disappointing. Like that he would leave to go and further his research. So I'm glad that it was nice that they kept him.
I'm interested to see what this is a jumping off point for him, because that's literally been a ball and chain for him, both mentally and professionally, because of the effort that he was putting into it, and it's gone now. So it'll be interesting to see where his character goes from here.
So it's interesting that you say that. So, the Ready Room is interesting to me because you're seeing some behind the scenes stuff. I think the Ready Room is great if you want to look at set design and costumes and thinking, like, I think it's incredible. Here's what I wasn't expecting, because typically things around Star Trek are so tight-lipped. I hope Mbenga doesn't get in trouble. So I hope Babs does not get in trouble, because in the Ready Room, he was talking a little bit, and I was like, really? Like, is that okay for you to say? And one of the things that he talks about is, he talks about the fact that they're already shooting season 2. And, Will's asking the same question that we are. Like, now with this resolved and behind you, like, do you think that it'll open up doors for your character? And he was like, oh, absolutely. I think in season 2, you're going to see a darker side. I was like, what? And he goes on to say, as he relates to the Klingons. And I was like, I don't know if you were supposed to say all that, man. I'm glad you did. But I
had a feeling we were going to see that again. I had a feeling that was going to happen again. But I mean, those aren't live, right? Like, they can cut stuff out, yeah. Because I feel like maybe that was kind of an on purpose slip, if that makes sense.
It's Paramount. There's no way. It's not like that was a live thing that they don't know is out there. So, but I think that's fascinating. The fact that we're going to see different sides of Mbenga, that the show's going to, he's going to grow. We're we're gonna who doesn't want to see the Klingons? I'm surprised we haven't seen them already. Maybe we'll, we got 2 more episodes. But yeah, what are you guys hoping to get out of the last 2 episodes? Any predictions? Any wish lists?
I think
Una's resolution. Sorry.
Wait, go ahead.
No, I want to know more about Una's species. I think they left us kind of up in the air about that. We found out she's, this really interesting alien, and hopefully they'll give us a little bit more of that. I'd like to see that for the end.
Wow. So here's something that's interesting. Kang says, L'Rell, please return. I mean, the timeline would kind of work, right?
That'd be awesome. I'm totally here for it. I don't know how it would happen. I don't know how they would weave it in. I am not a writer,
Discovery
but
era Klingons on Strange New World.
Mhm.
or would they go with TOS Klingons?
Probably I would hope that, I mean, just because I want to see the new Trek angry people, you know what I'm talking about, the people who's oh, they'd but in a mean way of just absolutely being really awful to writers, whatever, and the makeup team. I kind of want to see them again just to make people mad, because I think they were cool personally, and sometimes makeup changes, but I also would really love to see Mary Chieffo back. I think that would be really cool. I'm here for that.
I think that we're going to at least hear from the Gorn one more time.
I agree.
I was going to say that.
That's why Elizabeth is wearing the shirt.
I read somewhere that they have an episode in the works for this season that's pure horror, and I wonder if it's Gorn related.
I would love to see that.
To me, that makes awesome. What do we have? 2 left?
2 left.
I bet you it's next week's, because I don't know if they want to end on that kind of a niche episode.
That'd be a fun cliffhanger,
I
though.
think it would be a fun cliffhanger, personally.
Yeah, that's true.
And I also know that they're not done with the Gorn storyline, because I think that one thing that I loved the most about that particular episode was that it was left the way that it was. Mm-hmm. They didn't show them. It wasn't, because nothing is scarier than what our imaginations can create, right? So I think that we're going to get more of that, if not this season, definitely next season. And I'm interested to see where that goes personally. And I think it would be a really good cliffhanger if it were episode 10. I think it would be perfect cliffhanger material.
I don't even know if we need to see them directly, even like we did the last time. Even if we just find out that we're in their wake, and that we're 2 steps behind whatever they're up to, and cleaning up the mess and dealing with the fallout. We could still deal with the Gorn in that way before the end of the season. But I think that they're coming back before the end.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I think we're gonna see them next week.
I don't know. Already knows.
I don't know. I don't know. Do I have screeners? Yes. Have I watched them? No. So I don't know.
Weak.
May I start watching them the minute this podcast is over? It's possible. It's very possible.
So valid.
But I don't know yet. But I think we're gonna see him next week. And the truth is, we might see him in the next 2 episodes. And awesome. Still may get a cliffhanger. And normally I would not be okay with that. The only reason why I would be is because Lower Decks is coming. And so if you're going to leave me with some scary, crazy Gorn, then what's a great palate cleanser for that, to make sure that I'm okay and not having nightmares every night? Boy, that works.
Brad Word.
So, but no, I'm interested. I want to see the Gorn. I don't want the boogeyman left up to my own imagination. I think after looking at what we saw in TOS, we actually get an opportunity now to have some serious Hollywood hair, makeup, special effects, create something that I think could be an incredible addition to the Star Trek pantheon of characters.
Make it terrifying. Please make it terrifying.
Sure.
what's it called? The Demogorgon, like terrifying.
I mean, heck, look at just even what
Demogorgon.
they did with refreshing
Yeah.
the Queen on Picard.
Mhm.
That was so in character for her, but like that makeup and that refresh was very well done. And
Yes.
and I think that if that's any preview of what they can do and still respect the history, I'm really excited to see what the Gorn evolve into.
Yeah, I think for a first introduction to the Gorn, it was a good thing to kind of make it really creepy and then not see it until we get to the culmination of it, which would then be where we actually get to see it, and it's all like terrifying. And we've seen what Star Trek makeup teams can do. We've seen it.
Mhm.
It's amazing. It's incredible. I am
Hello,
so excited.
Saru.
Right. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see what they do with the Gorn. And I would be slightly disappointed if we don't see them ever. I kind of would get why as a device, but I want to see the Gorn. I want to see the Gorn.
Yeah, I'll also say, while I want to see the Gorn, and I think we will, I'm here for the Klingon too, because look, we've got Discovery for new aliens, right? We've got Picard for everything in between. This is our opportunity to do something that we haven't really been able to do, maybe in Star Trek ever, and that is go back and truly revisit the Klingon War, right? Like we got a little bit of that with Discovery, but now we really get to see kind of the evolution of the Federation and the Klingons becoming allies, and all the stuff that happened before that. I'm really curious about the Klingons, because I just think that what they were able to do with the Klingons as a species in terms of like the mythology behind it, the culture, not to mention you're talking about a Star Trek race that literally has its own language that people go around saying. Nobody on this podcast, I'm sure. I knew you. I knew it was you, Liz. But when you have something like that, like you have to use it. Like you have to come back to it, because it's just a quintessential part of the Star Trek landscape. So I'm excited for that. I'm guessing that'll be more season 2. So and they've hinted at it too many times for us not to have something really interesting. So I'm excited about that. All right. So first, let me just say thank you to all of you, Suzanne, Phil, Elizabeth. Appreciate you guys coming on the pod, with Mariah being on her away mission. As we wrap up, we've been going for a little over an hour. Let me go ahead and say anything else you guys want to mention before we truly wrap up the episode. Have we talked about it all? Did I leave anything out? Right? Because when Mariah comes back next week, you guys got to tell her I did a good job and I didn't like leave some major plot device laying on the in the cargo bay So I'm just saying,
If there had been more conflict maybe in this episode, but it was just pure fun.
It was so much fun.
Well, I had a few plot questions at the beginning of the episode, and it's not even worth bringing them up now because they were answered at the end, where it's like, oh, we have this all-powerful being that did XYZ. So it was, I felt like it was a really well buttoned up episode and a lot of fun to watch.
Great. All right. Suzanne, want to tell people where they can find you?
So I'm assuming they can see my Twitter at right there. Captain Janeway, first A is an X. I'm mostly on Twitter. I really don't use Instagram a lot. So if you want to find me on Twitter. And yeah, I'm there pretty much all the time, 24/7. So
Phil and Elizabeth, where can people find you if they want to talk about Trek?
Oh,
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I'm on Instagram, my little Trekkiverse, which it's kind of hard, but
He has all kinds.
It's just my like Star Trek collection, but I love talking Trek, so if anyone wants to talk.
All kinds of cool stuff. I'm not really active on the socials all that much. If you want to find me, you should join the Patreon. I'm all over that place. So
Thank you. That's what I was hoping one of you would say. Yes. So for just $2 an episode, that's $1 and $1, $2 an episode, you can join our Patreon, and you then get access to our Slack channel where you can talk to Elizabeth and Phil and do watch-alongs and hang out and talk all things Trek to the wee hours of the night if you like. So yes, if you want to see more of Elizabeth and Phil and so many others, just head over. You can find all of our information at StarTrekPod.co. You can also find us on Twitter at StarTrekPod and on Insta. So yeah. All right. So until our next pod, I will say live long and prosper, and good night.
good night, all.